So this is the first half of the slides that we needed to talk about last week, and that we didn't get to talk about because of weather. So hopefully this week will be better, and we'll be in class on Monday and Wednesday, the 10th and 12th. So anyway, we need to talk about the 1840s and 50s as we get closer and closer to the Civil War. So we need to know what was going on at that time. In 1831, you had Nat Turner's Rebellion. This was in Southampton County, Virginia, and the rebellion resulted in the deaths of 55 to 60 white people. Excuse me, the highest number of fatalities for any slave rebellion in mainland North America. The other difference would be the Haitian Revolution obviously in Haiti, in the Caribbean. This massacre with this many people dying created widespread fear, and it resulted in the cracking down on white slave owners, white citizens, for their lack of enforcement of the slave codes that were in place in Virginia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And so the white militias got together. Nat Turner was free for a good while after this. He was not immediately caught, and the state executed 56 suspects, slaves who were thought to be involved in the rebellion. Obviously, given the situation, they were not really that much into truth or justice or anything else. It was just random people. If they thought that they were involved, then that was good enough for the militia, the posse, the law enforcement people. Also, the white slave owners made sure that they made a statement to the slaves that were left on the plantations, that were still, on the plantations. And so what they did was they would beat, whip, abuse, mistreat, and some of them even killed the slaves randomly on their farms to make a point, sort of using their choice of victim, if you will, as an example. So this led to a lot of really abuse of the slaves who were innocent and had not done anything at all. This is an image of Nat Turner. State laws were passed that stopped educating enslaved or even free blacks. There was no education allowed, and there was the belief that if you educated the African Americans, that they would be likely to be able to read, and they would be more aware of their surroundings and what was going on, and that it would lead them to be dissatisfied, more easily dissatisfied, which would lead to rebellions on plantations and in slaveholding states. Increasingly, the slave population was increasing year by year in the South, and so as the proportion, the owner enslaved population ratio changed, and it became fewer and fewer white people and more enslaved blacks who were obviously dissatisfied. Control became a huge issue for them, so the laws became tighter and tighter to try to restrict as much activity as possible on the part of the enslaved people. The situation got much worse for enslaved people throughout the 19th century. Um, Laws against meetings. They couldn't have the right to assemble anymore. There were no civil rights for free blacks in the North. Churches that said that they must have a white minister at every meeting to monitor what was being said, because they knew that the African American preachers were preaching rebellion or passive resistance. Nat Turner was very religious. He was very smart, and he had visions, religious visions throughout his life. He was literate, which was, a good reason for the states to refuse education for the enslaved population. He lived in Southampton County all of his life. The militias killed 200 or more enslaved people to make a point to make sure that they sent a strong message to the enslaved population in the area. He was hanged in November of 1831, so he was captured August 23rd, and they made sure that he was executed by November. Obviously, the abuse between being flayed, beheaded, and then displayed afterwards made sure that they sent a very strong message again. There was a road named after him as well. And that was just a trivia, that there's a road in Southampton County, Virginia, named after this man. Also going on at this time was an issue with nativism versus immigration. This is one of the first, other than the Alien and Sedition Act. This was the second, but it was one of the big ones. I remember the Alien Act was where they made the citizenship requirements. You had to be in the country for 14 years as opposed to 5 years to restrict the flow of immigrants into the country. And so this is what happens again in the 1840s with the Irish immigration that's going on, particularly Irish. The nativism is the concept of native-born populations who are restricting the flow of immigrants into the country, and that, a preference for native-born citizens as opposed to immigrants in any country, not just here. This was caused by cultural classes. They were not pleased with the pluralistic society in the Northeast, particularly. As we said earlier in class a couple of weeks ago, that there was no reason really for immigrants to come south, because they couldn't get jobs because of the enslaved population. So they stayed in the north, in cities in the north, and then they moved west to farms if they could afford land. So why were there not more clashes than there were? Well, you had a lot of land, so people were moving. They were moving west, and so they weren't densely populated necessarily. But then there's also the American economy was growing, so everybody had a job. So as long as everybody has a job, then nobody worries about the fact that immigrants also have jobs. But if you have an economy that is in decline or is lagging, then the people who were born here begin to think, we got to keep these immigrants out so that we can all have jobs. Those of us that were born here can have jobs. The American economy was growing so fast that they needed the immigrants for a long while. They might not have been able to become as industrialized as they had, because the immigrants were the ones who would work the tough jobs in the factories, long hours, low pay, dangerous work, and the Americans didn't necessarily want to do those jobs. I need to check the time. Okay. All right. So we also have at this time territorial expansion. The territorial expansion causes problems with politics as well as diplomacy. You have Oregon country. There were about a few hundred, maybe 700 British citizens living in the Oregon country at this time. And then you had Texas. Well, William Henry Harrison is then elected in the 1830s. He gets pneumonia and dies after 1 month in office. So the vice president, John Tyler, is then president. William Henry Harrison's the top picture and John Tyler's the bottom picture. He had death threats. He was called his accidency because he was sort of like a klutz, and he was just a bumbling person, and they called him the executive ass because they were very disturbed that he had vetoed the National Bank. So he was not a real popular president. So you have all kinds of things going on with this issue of territorial expansion, not to mention the issues with the expansion of the slave states or free states. So Texas achieved statehood in 1845. It's the 28th state. Mexico says that, oh, America stole it, but this 10 years of Comanche raids, and the Mexicans were unable to do anything about it, weakened Mexico. So they lost Texas, and America basically did steal it. But anyway, that's another story. The Comanche raids continued against the Americans then, so it was a dangerous area, this disputed territory that was here, because this is the disputed area, and so this whole existence threatened all Americans because of the Comanche raids. Oregon country, you had Russia, who was in on this because they were close, and they were it was with Alaska and all what's now Alaska. So there were all sorts of clashes going on with this. Spain, Russia, Great Britain, and the United States all claimed this at some point. There was exploration and occupation. There were few enough in Oregon country. There were few enough British people to worry about, because Oregon country was so huge. The movement of Americans into this land, it didn't really bother anybody. So the Brits and the Americans kind of got along in 1818. And so, but if you notice here how far north Mexico is at this point, how far north Mexico actually extends. In the Willamette Valley in Oregon Territory, you have Oregon Fever, the Oregon Trail. You guys, Oregon Trail used to be a computer game, but I guess you guys are too young for that. It was one of the first computer games. Let me check the time again. Okay, I'm going to stop this video, and then I will start another one.